And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. A great day if you follow partisan politics. A great day for Republicans. Really, why? There were no important Republican duels on the ballot, but there was a setup for a major Republican victory, the setup in the state of Michigan, where the candidate for Senate is one of those people who is a dream candidate if you're working on the other side, because he has a lot of problems with his candidacy. The main problem being that he's way out of the national mainstream. We're talking about the victory in the state of Michigan for the candidate Abdul El Sayed, a physician and a progressive activist, as he is described. And he won in a very close race against the establishment choice, so-called, whose name was Haley Wilson. But there's all kinds of asterisks and footnotes that need to be paid to this particular election before people are ready to bang the gong and to say, once again, the extreme left, the Democratic Socialists, have won a big victory. Yes, it's a victory for the progressive side of the party, but it's a temporary victory because it doesn't elect anybody. This is a primary. This is a choice for Abdul al-Sayed to be the Democratic nominee in the state of Michigan. Is he a strong nominee? No, he is not. And he's running against Mike Rogers, who had no opposition on the Republican side. He is a particular favorite of the Trump administration, and he is a very likely winner in November. Meanwhile, there was another race that has not gotten much attention, but has a fascinating headline that made the New York Times. It's a state race for a congressional seat in Missouri, not Michigan. And the headline for the New York Times, it says, pro-Israel Democrat fends off Democratic Socialist comeback attempt in Missouri. And this is fascinating and deserves more attention than it's received. The story here is, as they put it, Representative Wesley Bell of Missouri, a moderate and pro-Israel Democrat, fended off a primary challenge from a former congresswoman and Democratic Socialist on Tuesday. In other words, the Democratic Socialist lost big time in this one. This, according to the Associated Press, in a loss and a setback for the surging socialist movement. Former Representative Cori Bush, who was very extreme during the time she was in the House of Representatives, Mr. Bell's predecessor in the St. Louis area district, had hoped to add to the high-profile victories that socialists have notched over Democratic incumbents this year in New York City and Denver and Seattle and elsewhere. But Mr. Bell, a former prosecuting attorney, not defense attorney, and a city councilman, held on. He rose to prominence after the 2014 protests in Ferguson, Missouri, which erupted after a white police officer fatally shot Michael Brown, an unarmed black teenager. In 2018, Mr. Bell ousted the county prosecutor who had declined to indict the officer. In 2024, amid a backlash against progressive politics, Wesley Bell took on Cori Bush, who was also black, both black. This was not a racially based contest, but it was an ideologically based contest because Cori Bush was a member of the so-called Squad, a group of hyper-progressive congresswomen of color. Think of Rashida Tlaib, or even more obviously, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That was the Squad. And Cori Bush was considered a member of that Squad. And then in 2024, that was when Cori Bush lost in the Democratic primary to Wesley Bell, who was more moderate, and Israel was a big issue in this particular race in Missouri, despite the fact that there were not major either Jewish communities or Arab Muslim communities in that district in Missouri. But Wesley Bell won, and he won again last night, and won carefully. The loss, says the New York Times, says the loss was a setback for Democratic Socialists who have gained a foothold in Democratic primaries in this year as the party's voters, fed up with establishment politicians, have shifted toward more liberal positions and the populist outsider pitches of socialist candidates. What they've really shifted toward is looking for something new, looking for a change of pace. And the victories have not been overwhelming. And if you take a look at the numbers on the race last night with Abdul El Sayed, he got 48.5% of the primary vote. Haley Stevens, the quote establishment candidate, got 47.5%. In other words, it was a difference of 1 percentage point. And this has been typical about a lot of the victories that have been heralded as part of the coming wave of socialism. For instance, with the most celebrated Democratic socialist in the country, Zoran Mamdani, the mayor of New York, he won against Andrew Cuomo, who was a deeply troubled candidate. I mean, who basically had to give up his position as governor of New York because of personal behavior and basically assaulting women in different circumstances. Okay, even that race was hyper close. Mamdani did not get over 50%. Or with the mayor of Seattle, the new mayor, Mayor Wilson, who was also a Democratic socialist, she won ultimately after recounts and recounts and recounts and 3 weeks before the election was decided. And she won by a margin of 0.73%, less than a percentage point, in the closest mayoral election in Seattle by percentage since 1906. Okay, think of that, more than 100 years. So these elections are close, and the election last night is not a sign of a sweeping tidal wave. It's a sign of restlessness and the American people wanting something different on foreign policy as well. We will talk about the impact of the war issue and where we are going next. That and more coming up on The Medved Show.
Join in your daily dose of debate.
I'm sorry, I cool my temper here. You had my blood really boiling.
Listen to you occasionally when I'm driving. Turns my stomach every time I do.
You are not always right. Get a grip. You are not always right.
The Michael Medved Show.
And on the Michael Medved Show, it is very important to actually not just look at the general sense of who was the winner, who was the loser, but how they won and why they won. And part of the margin for victory for Abdul El Sayed, the progressive activist who won the Democratic primary for senator from the state of Michigan, replacing a Democratic senator named Gary Peters. So this is really a must-win race for the Democrats if they're going to have any hope at all of winning the control of the U.S. Senate. But we'll get to that in a moment. The thing that just leaps out at you when you look at the numbers is, I mentioned earlier that the vote was extremely close. The vote in the primary was 741,000 for al-Sayed, and it was 726,000 for Haley Stevens. And that's less than 1% difference. It's 48.5% to 47.5%. And the missing votes, because that doesn't total 100%, neither candidate obviously got a majority, but the reason that al-Sayed got a plurality is because there was a third candidate named Mallory McMorrow, who was another moderate establishment candidate. She was somebody who'd had a big career in the state legislature, and she had just pulled out at the very end of the race because it was obvious she was taking votes away from Haley Stevens. And the idea was that if Mallory McMorrow were still out there getting votes, that it would be fatal to the establishment candidate, because that is where those votes would come from. And sure enough, Mallory McMorrow got 4% of the votes, and al-Sayed won by 1% of the votes. So obviously, if there hadn't been this third candidate also drawing on so-called mainstream voters who were not Democratic Socialists or anything close. And by the way, in fairness, the Abdul al-Sayed says he's not a socialist. He says he's a capitalist, but he is in favor of all kinds of socialist ideas, like some of the cockamamie ideas, including cutbacks in law enforcement, that are part of the Democratic Socialist banner and part of their agenda. And difference here in the race it has to do with the narrowness of all of these Democratic victories for Democratic Socialists of America. Because if you look at Colorado or New York, and New York, both the state election they just had and the city election that elected Mamdani, it's all very close. But that doesn't prevent al-Sayed from celebrating. And he celebrated this morning, not last night, because this morning he had gotten a call conceding the race from Haley Stevens. And at that point, he took the podium and celebrated his own victory, sounding like this. This is clip 19.
And despite their spending, despite their lies told in ad after ad after ad after ad on TV, we're walking into the rest of this evening with a 3-point lead. And so as folks ask, if and when we win this race, how are you going to beat Mike Rogers and their money? I want you to remind them that if we come through this, when we come through this, inshallah, that we'll have taken $70 million on the chin and kept fighting back.
It was actually about $60 million that Haley Stevens spent, not quite 70, but it's still a tremendous amount of money. And part of the message here is that money is not always determinative in how people fare in races coming up. And this is actually good news for Democrats, because in the races that are going to decide the control of the House of Representatives and the control of the Senate, certainly, and control of governorships as well, if you look race after race after race, there is more money being raised by Republicans in the off-year elections that are coming up. Syed also found a need to tell his jubilant supporters that he was committed to another cause that he is not generally associated with because he hasn't shown any consistent commitment. But here he is talking about what he terms Jewish safety. This is clip 20.
I want to speak specifically to an issue that has been focused on in this race. To my Jewish American sisters and brothers, one of the most indelible memories of this campaign will have been the opportunity to break bread with you at Seder, to worship with you at Shul, to be embraced by you. And listening to sisters and brothers who said, I want to join this movement because AIPAC doesn't speak for me. Because I understand that self-determination for one people does not require the quenching of self-determination for another people. That unless all of us are free, none of us are free. I want to tell you the great gift that you've given me. And to all of my sisters and brothers of the Jewish faith or any faith at all or no faith at all, I want you to know that my commitment to your safety, my commitment to Jewish safety is the same commitment that I have to the safety of my own daughters. Because if there is one question of a political philosophy that ought to animate us all is, what would we build? What would we do if we treated all of our kids like they were all of our kids?
Okay, this sounds fine. And yes, it should be reassuring to some limited extent, but to a limited extent he says that he is committed to self-determination for Jewish people. Does that mean that he favors the slogan from the river to the sea, all of Palestine must be free? Does that mean that he is giving up the very strongly pro-Hamas and pro-terrorism and pro-Palestinian rhetoric that was a part of his campaign? We will get to that and to more, and to President Trump's reaction to the elections yesterday. That and more coming up on the Medved Show.
Entertain your brain.
Just sit back and enjoy the show.
Every day on the Michael Medved Show.
This morning, media ran a headline that said Trump loses it as communist, in quotes, Abdul El-Sayed wins Michigan's Democratic Senate primary, get ready for another rigged election. This is what the story by David Gilmour reports, is that President Donald Trump this morning, unloaded on newly confirmed Democratic Senate candidate for Michigan, Abdul El-Sayed. And he branded him a communist and claimed that the state's election system was third world and predicting November's midterm contest would be rigged. Okay, this is because the Republicans got the Democratic nominee they wanted? Really? Because a number of leading Republicans, including Mike Rogers, who is going to be the Republican nominee, he was unopposed for the Republican nomination. He's a good guy. And he was a former congressman who is trying to make a comeback now, and somebody with a great deal of national security experience, etc. In any event, to say to Mike Rogers that he is already doomed because the midterm election contest would be rigged. Media reports the tirade came moments after El-Sayed's campaign announced that Representative Haley Stevens, a Democrat, Michigan, had called to concede the state's closely watched Democratic primary on Wednesday morning. Trump took to Truth Social, where he alleged widespread election fraud in Wayne County, that's Detroit, while urging Republicans to rally behind GOP Senate nominee Mike Rogers in November. Wayne County, Detroit in Michigan, is one of the most corrupt voting areas in the United States, if not the world. Okay, President Trump carried Michigan last time when he actually won this election. And, okay, but it's the most corrupt voting system in the world. Trump wrote, miracles happen in Wayne County, including more votes being cast than there are voters. Without offering evidence, says Mediaite, because there is no evidence, the president went on to accuse Al-Sayed, without naming him, of benefiting from fraudulent voting, writing, the communist who is not liked in Detroit is potentially in vote counter trouble. The radical left socialist has a real shot, and don't discount all those fake mail-in ballots that will surprisingly show up at the last moment. Get ready for another rigged election. And then he says, in November, we must vote for Mike Rogers, and probably most Michiganders will, and make Michigan too big to rig. God bless America, President DJT. And here is what President DJT sounded like later in the morning when he talked about candidates who were backed by the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. This is clip 17.
What do you think about the traction these candidates who are backed by the DSA and are members of the DSA are getting?
Well, I think it's crazy because they're going to ruin our country. They want to, I don't know if they want to. I think either they're very naive or they actually want to ruin the country. No matter where you look, go back 1,000 years with different names, anybody doing what they're doing and what they're espousing, everything turns out to ashes and junk and filth. You know, one thing I said the other day for the first time ever, never thought of it, but you go to these cities that are taken over by the socialists and the communists, they're always filthy dirty, they're disgusting, they're always dirty, and, you know, I'm a clean person, and people I know are clean, they like that, and you are, I know you very well, you're very clean, but they're, aside from crime, aside from all of the other problems, no jobs, no anything, no money, they're always filthy, disgusting, dirty. And that's what you'll.
Okay, what's ironic here is that anyone who has been to Detroit recently, Detroit has gone through some dark days, but it is generally acknowledged that there has been an improvement and that Detroit has made something of a comeback. It is still not a garden spot. It is still no longer holds the position. It used to hold the position of being the fifth largest population city in the country. A lot of people have left Detroit, but it has been better off partially because of better local leadership. And yes, some of that local leadership has been more diverse in terms of representing different ethnic groups and ethnic backgrounds, and has even included some conservative leadership. And that's not to make it a model for the future, but there are reasons why President Trump carried Detroit in this, carried not Detroit, but the state of Michigan in this last election. Meanwhile, there are people out there, including Ro Khanna, the congressman from Northern California and potential presidential candidate, and Van Jones, who's a former aide to President Obama and is now a respected commentator on CNN. They were talking together this morning about Al-Sayed's win. Here's what they had to say. This is clip 16.
The bigger picture about what this represents in changing. It's historic in Michigan, a swing state. And every person who's brown or black or a different faith should look at this and say, you know what? I can run for office and I can become a senator. I could become president. That's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing for the country.
Yeah.
Look, I just want to I just want to echo that. If you are a young Muslim kid or an Arab kid, look at these numbers. Look at these numbers right next to us. You can do anything you want to in this country. We need you. We love you. If you're a parent with tears in your eyes tonight, I get it. We can talk about, as the congressman said, the politics later. It's history tonight, and God bless you.
Okay, does that mean that there will be tears in your eyes of despair when El Sayed loses the election to Mike Rogers, who does not have that, quote, advantage or that factor of representing some minority, ethnic, or religious group? He's a mainstream Republican conservative. And yes, he is a MAGA supporter, but I think people will find him to be offering a lot fewer questions than President Trump does in his leadership. Yeah, and again, what's also very sad is you talk about setting up an election to be rigged. Well, there's almost a kind of a rigging that comes along with some of the rhetoric that you're hearing. When al-Sayed loses the election, which he will in November, is that Islamophobia? Is that means that the people, the voters of the state of Michigan should be condemned? Is it heartbreaking? We will get to that and more coming up on the Medved Show. One of the big questions on the table is, does the Democratic Socialists contingent, which has obviously been a growing contingent within the Democratic Party, is nothing at all like a majority of the Democratic Party, but it is a viable and increasingly influential and certainly increasingly attention-getting segment of the liberal half, if you want, or you can say the liberal one-third of the American public. The idea that they are too radical for the United States is one that is clearly supported when you sit down and you read the actual platform of the Democratic Socialist Group of America. They want to abolish the U.S. Senate. They want to abolish the presidency, for that matter. They believe that the all-important decisions should be made by the remaining house of the legislature, the one house, the unicameral house of the House of Representatives. And part of that is because they think they have a better chance of controlling the House than they do of the Senate. Certainly in this election, the Democrats have a better chance of taking over the House of Representatives. But as long as they're associated with rhetoric like Frances Gill put forward on Fox News, she is a political committee member, one of the ideological leaders for the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. And she was on Fox News, asked a question that should be among the easiest possible political questions that anyone in public life would receive. But listen to the way that she fumbles it and stumbles while trying to provide a response. This is clip 15.
The vast majority of calls that go into the police are not about violent crimes. They're not about dangerous situations where people would want protection from police. One thing that we can see is that when we expand unarmed crisis response, like we've done in Los Angeles, we decrease the cost that we're spending on police and policing in the city, and we improve the outcomes, and we get people who are suffering from, severe mental illness or, what have you, the actual help that they need. So I think there are way better ways to manage.
Francis, do you think killers should go to prison?
Go ahead, Daniel.
Francis, do you think killers should go to prison, rapists should go to prison, and especially, non-citizens? Should non-citizens that are killed or raped, should they be deported?
I mean, who I think should go to prison are the people who are protecting the Jeffrey Epstein and people who are
just answer the question. Do you think people should go to prison for being murderers? This is so simple. You could just say yes.
I mean,
people should go to jail because they killed somebody.
That billionaires who are stealing.
Of course, I believe so. Like 99% of Americans.
You're not answering the question, Francis.
Martha, she cannot say.
You're not
she
answering the
cannot
question.
say.
Really? You cannot say whether killers and rapists and violent criminals should go to prison or be deported? And that's one of the problems is deporting killers isn't enough. It isn't appropriate. I mean, obviously, you need to take those dangers to the rest of us out of circulation. I mean, isn't this mad? And the best she can do is to bring up Jeffrey Epstein. And by the way, Jeffrey Epstein did go to prison and went to prison twice. And of course, killed himself in prison. I know there are people who don't believe that he actually killed himself, but he did. And the idea that conversations like the one we just heard get attention helps to explain why I think there is a tendency in the media. It's not ideological. It's a desire for ratings. Is they want to give all of this attention right now to the Democratic Socialist of America movement because it's so different. It's so novel. It's so cuckoo. And it's so extreme that it's going to get attention. But does it deserve that attention? Here is Van Jones on CNN, again, talking about why, at least in one capacity, this particular development is so irresistible for media coverage. Here's Van Jones on CNN, clip 14.
What are the stakes here for Democrats?
Look, this is the whole ball of wax. I'm from Jackson, Tennessee. There was a guy named Gil Scott Heron who had a great poem. It was called "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." Gil Scott Heron is wrong. The revolution is being televised and podcasts and streamed and elected tonight. Why is that? It's because there is a credibility gap that's opened up between the Democratic Party establishment and this insurgency. People are looking at people and they're saying, you've been telling us the same thing for a long time and our lives are not any better. We got Donald Trump twice. There's also an innovation gap. Why can you spend $60 million and get whooped like this? Because the old model was you get the donors to get the consultants to buy a bunch of ads and you win. That's how you get attention. This movement says, I don't need donors, ads, I don't need consultants. I'm going right to the people with TikTok and grassroots. And they've disintermediated the entire donor class, disintermediated the entire consultant class. And this is a revolution. And so this is going to happen again and again. The Democratic Party is now Blockbuster. These kids are Netflix. We are selling CDs out the trunk. This is Napster becoming Spotify, and it's happening.
Is he going to prove right as we get closer and closer to Election Day in November? I doubt it. I doubt it very profoundly. And I also doubt the wisdom of what Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland said on CNN when he was asked about whether Abdul El-Sayed is too far left to win. This is clip 13.
I think in this case, Abdul El-Sayed has been the populist candidate among the Democrats, the anti-status quo candidate among the Democrats. And he understands that this is not so much left versus right as it is folks at the very top, the top 1%, rigging the economy and the rules of the game in a way that benefits them and hurts workers and everybody else.
Okay, is that the case that this is, he's not too far left because it has nothing to do with ideology? When you talk about people who want to defund the police, people who want to abolish prisons, we talked about that yesterday, people who want to completely restructure American government. And yes, we have a lot of people and a majority of Americans now who think we're on the wrong track. But I think that part of what people believe about being on the wrong track is being too radical on the left and on the right. There's a very powerful and I think very pertinent new column about the distance between the DSA and MAGA, is that it's a very depressing thing for most Americans, says Abby McCloskey, that the fact is that that's your choice today. Your choice is nothing that is reasonable or moderate or something that can actually bring together a majority of Americans. So how do we do that? Or are we left with a situation where it's either picking people like Abdul al-Sayed, or you're on the other side picking, well, you name them. There are plenty of MAGA. Donald Trump or J.D. Vance. All of this is one of the questions that is going to be worked out for the political future. Certainly we'll have a better indication of where we're going after the November elections, which should send a message to this greatest nation on God's green earth.